Try again. So this is Big Ben. Here we are. And we're in the Houses of Parliament. And over on the right hand side, Parliament Square. And we'll just carry on down here. As I say, I'm walking directly into the sun, which is going to affect the quality of the picture. However, I'll just ask you to bear with that for the time being, ladies and gentlemen. So, House of Parliament down here on the left-hand side, behind heavy railings. Because everybody is now very jittery about the threat of terrorism. And they've put up barriers here, so we have to make our way round them if we want to proceed. Right. So, Church of St Margaret in Westminster, which I've already discussed in other videos. That on the right hand side is Henry VII's Chapel, which is part of Westminster Abbey. And over here on the left we have the St Stephen's entrance to the Houses of Parliament. This is or was at least, the entrance which members of Parliament used to take when they were entering the building. Probably not quite so much more now. I think they have to go through the security clearance that everybody else does. All this is very, very recent and is much to be regretted, I think. So there you have it, St Stephen's entrance. And through the railings you can just about make out the statue on horseback of King Richard I, our Crusader king, who reigned from 1189 to 1199. And most of that reign was not spent in England. So he was a Crusader king and spent a lot of it fighting wars in the Holy Land at a great cost of taxpayers' money. And he was captured by the Duke of Austria and held in prison for a ransom which cost even more money. Now, I've done this all entirely on spec, ladies and gentlemen. I haven't done any preparation for this, and it probably shows. I say the idea of these videos is just to take people through the streets of London and to show you what it's like living in London in 2025, or the 2020s I suppose, because this sort of thing could continue for several years to come, because I've only really just done a little bit of it. Now here we've got another obstacle. We can't go any further, which is annoying. So I'm going to have to cross over the road while I get the green light. And then I'm going to have to cross back when I get the opportunity, if I get the opportunity. Here we are. Here we have the Victoria Tower, which is not quite so well known as the Elizabeth Tower, but it's another feature on the Houses of Parliament. And at one time it was the tallest building, four-square building in the world when it was built in 1858. 336 feet, and the purpose of the Victoria Tower was to hold the records of Parliament right from the earliest times to the present day. which previously had been held in this building here, the Jewel House. But we'll carry on. What I want to do is to go into Victoria Tower Gardens, which is immediately adjacent to Parliament, and talk about some of the stuff there before we continue further down Millbank. Now the sun is not quite in our eyes as much as it was, so that makes it more bearable. Sorry, I wasn't expecting all these obstructions. And further down here we have what we call a zebra crossing. These are unique to Britain, and they were a feature that were created originally in the 1930s as a means of crossing the roads. Set up by a man, Minister of Transport, called Horseferry, and it was he, for that reason, that the lamps are called the Belisha beacons. And they're zebra crossings because, as you can see, they are painted rather like a zebra. Now, what the hell is going on? They have closed the gates. Oh, rats. Oh. Once you're on a zebra crossing, you have the absolute right of way, and the cars have to stop for you. Well, I'm going to see if I can get into the gardens. Footpath closed. And if they have closed it, well, that's annoying, because there are one or two things within the gardens that I wanted to talk about and I wanted to discuss. So let's just see. Are these gates open to the public? It looks as if they are. Oh, now that's a mercy. Right. Okay, so we can now go into the gardens, and the first thing we see is the statue to Emmeline Pankhurst. Emmeline Pankhurst was the famous leader of the suffragette movement in the early part of the 20th century. She was originally named Emmeline Goulden. She married a barrister by the name of Richard Pankhurst, and she became very active as a social activist in the late Victorian and Edwardian period, basically campaigning for the rights of women to vote, which eventually women were given the vote in 1918. That was immediately after the First World War. She was controversial insofar as she started all sorts of political activities, such as smashing shop windows and putting bombs in letterboxes, and also practicing starving to death, as it were, in jails. So, yes, still remains a controversial character. Nevertheless, women got the vote in 1918. Emmeline Pankhurst didn't actually start the movement for women's suffrage. That had been sort of on the boil since the 1880s. And it was the failure of the Liberal government in 1884 to introduce female suffrage that really triggered Emmeline Pankhurst to start her own movement. Now, we're in the gardens. Here we are. So you can see that now right in front of you. And what I have to do now is talk a bit about this sculpture here by a Frenchman called Rodin. And it depicts the 6 burghers of Calais, Calais being a port in the northeast corner of France, which had actually been the distance between Dover and Calais is only about 21 miles, so inevitably Calais became of great interest to English people crossing over the English Channel. Here you have it. And the story goes that Edward III, this was the beginning of what they called the 100 Years' War. This was a dispute between England and France as to who had the rightful claim to the crown of France. And it went on for much longer than 100 years. Didn't finish, started sort of about 1338 and went on till 1453. Starting and stopping and starting and stopping. Anyway, long story short, in 1347, Edward III went and captured and held Calais siege. And eventually the people of Calais surrendered, and he said what he wanted was the 6 chief burghers of Calais to come out with nooses around their necks and to be hanged. If they did that, then he would spare the city. Whereupon the 6 burghers came out, suitably attired, and Queen Philippa of Hainaut, who was the wife of Edward III, pleaded for their lives, and so that's how their lives were spared. But anyway, this is the statue by Rodin. You can see one of the burghers there has the keys to the city. Anyway, we'll move on from here, but before we do that, you can see in the distance the Buxton Fountain, the Buxton Memorial Fountain, named in honour of Thomas Buxton, who was very active in a number of social causes in the 19th century, but probably the one for which he's most famous is the emancipation of the slaves, the abolition of the slave trade and the abolition of slaves, which he did in conjunction with William Wilberforce. He's not quite so well remembered as William Wilberforce, but anyway, there's a statue, or there's not a statue, there's a fountain there, and that's what that fountain is. It's called the Buxton Fountain. There is talk of erecting a Holocaust memorial and education centre in this half of the gardens, and it's been on the drawing board for a long time. There have been a number of objections to it because it's thought the building is too large for planning regulations, but they got planning permission to go ahead, and then there was an appeal. So that's all still undecided and will probably rumble on for some years to come. But anyway, if it does come about, then there will be a Holocaust Memorial and Educational Centre. And my only observation about that is that it will probably become a target for terrorists, which is rather sad. So let's just turn around here to the right, and what I need to do now is cross over the road, and since I don't have a crossing, that could be a problem. Let's see if there's anything coming. No, there isn't, so let's do it now. There's a bus here, so I don't want to go under the wheels of a bus. Right. What we're now doing is making our way along Great Peter Street. It's called Great Peter Street because St. Peter has the dedication of Westminster Abbey. And we'll just make our way, say, coming off the main road, just heading down here. Because it's just off these side streets that you miss things which you may not find otherwise. So that's one of the reasons for doing these videos, just to show you those parts of London which sometimes escape attention. Right, Studio N. Don't know quite what that means. Right, now then, just down here on our immediate left-hand side, we have the headquarters of the Institute of Economic Affairs. That's right, the Institute of Economic Affairs. They are a right-wing think tank, very much favoured by Margaret Thatcher way back in the day. And this, you probably can't see it with the sunlight glaring straight at you, is Lord North Street. Let's try to see if we can get some shade and get a better view of it then. Right. So this is Lord North Street. There we go. This is Lord North Street, and Lord North was the Prime Minister who served King George III from 1770 to 1782. In other words, he was the Prime Minister who was in charge of the government during the time of the American War of Independence. So his handling of that business was controversial, to say the very least. But anyway, this shows you what this street was laid out. It was actually constructed in 1722, so it's very early 18th century. And it leads directly into Smith Square. And you can see the church here, which was once the church of St John's, Smith Square, otherwise known as Queen Anne's Footstool, on account of the fact that it has 4 towers at each corner. And the thinking going, it was designed by a man called Thomas Archer, who was commissioned by Queen Anne to build a series of churches. Originally the idea was 50, only 17 ever got built, but Thomas Archer was summoned into the presence of Queen Anne, who talked about the building of the church and kicked over her footstool and said, design a church rather like that. Anyway, that's the story. I don't know whether it's true. But anyway, this is Thomas Archer, who was the architect. Here we have a green plaque this time. W.T. Stead, 1849 to 1912. Journalist and reformer of great renown, lived here from 1904 to 1912. Ooh, how about that? Right, so this is Smith Square, and it's been the address of the headquarters of the Labour Party at one time, Transport House, and also of the Conservative Party at one time, but that was quite a while ago. The church here, St John the Evangelist, was bombed out. It was completely gutted in the last war, and it wasn't restored as a church, but it's a place where they put on performances of concerts and so forth of classical music. There's another street, and just turn around here and make our way along towards Horseferry Road. Yes. So in this particular part of London, obviously what you're going to find is a lot of stuff that's relating to Parliament, whether it's the headquarters of political parties or think tanks or anything to do with British politics. And further down here, a place where they all go to refresh themselves, is a pub called the Marquis of Granby. And the Marquis of Granby, he was John Manners, the Marquis of Granby, who lived in the 18th century and was one of the commanders of the British Army at that time. And he was famous for giving large sums of money to veterans who were really too old to fight, but he gave them the money they needed to set themselves up in business running a pub. And for that reason, he is commemorated not only here. Oh, now there's something about this. Let's just see what it has to say for itself. The Marquis of Granby, Romney Street, is founded on Westminster side of Lambeth Bridge. The pub is named after Lieutenant General John Manners, the eldest son of the 3rd Duke of Rutland. Manners did not outlive his father, so he was known by his father's subsidiary title, Marquis of Granby. Granby served as an overall commander of the British troops in the battlefield during the 7 Years' War during the 18th century. He was subsequently awarded the post of Commander-in-Chief of the British Army in 1766. Granby was very popular with his troops, often rewarding his men from his own pocket. Some of the beneficiaries set themselves up as publicans, naming their inn in his honour. The Marquis of Granby is best known today for supposedly having more pubs named after him than any other person. Here at Romney Street, the Marquis of Granby is a historic pub with parliamentary connections. It houses a division bell that still rings today to call MPs back to Parliament. So, there you have it. So it's one of these little pubs which by the side you'll miss if somebody didn't really point it out to you. And what we're now doing is making our way up towards Horseferry Road. Now, to explain the name, the Horseferry was a crossing of the River Thames on the site of what used to be, what is now rather, Lambeth Bridge. The idea of a horse ferry meant that if you take an ordinary ferry, you just cross as an individual, but if you have a horse, you needed a special ferry to get across the river. This is Horseferry Road leading up there to Victoria Station and down here towards the bridge. Let's cross over the road. It's actually quite quiet today, but then it's Sunday. So if you wanted to, if you were riding a horse and you wanted to cross over the river, you'd have to come here. That's what it amounts to. And the Archbishop of Canterbury used to make a great deal of money out of the ferry, so he was very concerned that the bridge should not be built. However, he was thwarted in that, and they built the bridge anyway. So what I want to do is just take you up here for a little distance, and then we'll continue the journey. I've been talking now for over 20 minutes, which I think is quite long enough for one video, so I'm going to start another one in just a moment. But we'll come up here, and as we do this, you'll see that the name of this street is Thorney Street, commemorating the Isle of Thorns way back in the day. I mean, this is going back over, well, before the foundation of Westminster Abbey, so it's going back several hundred years. It was just an island next to the banks of the River Thames covered with brambles, known as the Isle of Thorns. So here we have it, ladies and gentlemen. I think what I will do at this stage is just go a little bit further forward, then I'll close down this video and I'll start another one almost immediately. Just let me take a breath. Okay, over and out.